video a little while ago, I talked about the minor blues, and in that video I was talking about making choices about creating bass lines. I talked about a tool that Ron Carter uses that I called vertical vines, and the idea is to think vertically on every beat for what notes are available in every beat and to sort of think visually about them. Well, I thought a little bit more about it, and I felt like what I was showing you was perhaps a little bit muddled, and something that was a little bit clearer came to me. So I wanted to share that with you today as we talk about walking bassline choices. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining me. We're talking about choices today. We're talking about walking bass lines, and we're talking about how we can create things that we want to hear and things that are new and feel open to different options. And certainly Mr. Ron Carter, the maestro, is a master of options. If nothing else, that's maybe what he's best known for, is that he can put some crazy notes on a beat and make it make total sense, and it all sort of becomes illuminated when we hear it. But analytically, you're like, what is happening? That said, I think that he is, perhaps, this is just a guess, if you're a visual person like I am, seeing these sort of columns that I have created for you. And when we looked at that earlier video of the minor blues, I was sort of writing note heads on a staff, and when you put a bunch of choices together, it all gets pretty sort of dense and hard to look at, and we don't normally look at music this way. And so I thought, let me think of a little bit of a clearer way to try to communicate what I think will allow for a lot more clarity in the choices that we make from beat to beat. So the idea is still the same. I'm just sort of changing what we did visually. Here I'm creating columns above each beat, thinking 4 beats per bar, creating columns where I am representing a full chromatic scale within 1 octave. And of course our bass line shouldn't stay within 1 octave, but I don't have space to put every octave of the chromatic scale. But so we have each represented on beat 1, 2, 3, and 4. And for me, I've highlighted the chord tones for that particular chord of the moment, just so that it becomes a little more clear what the sort of root harmony is, the foundational harmony is in that bar at the moment. What I suggest you might want to do, and perhaps I'll put an example here up on the screen, I haven't made this yet, but is to also highlight, and perhaps in a different shade or whatever, or maybe just write in only, the scale that you're using in the moment for that bar. Now the reason I included a chromatic scale is because we want to have the chromatic approach notes available at all times too. So it's not just the chord tones of a given chord, an arpeggio, and it's not just a scale, but rather everything is really technically available. But at the same time, we do want to fulfill our role of reinforcing that harmony of the moment. So that's why we want to give special attention to the arpeggio, how the chord is spelled, and then a scale that goes along with it. Essentially though, it's pretty easy from that point. You get started from one place and you can visually track where you're going and what the options are if you're trying to decide what can I play next in this given moment. If you're sort of at the beginning part of your journey of learning how to walk, you might just, instead of doing the chromatic scale, you might just use a given scale for that particular bar. So if it's an F major chord for bar 1, you might just put an F major scale in that column as opposed to the chromatic notes. Maybe leave those boxes empty though. And I'm going to actually include a PDF of just empty boxes so that you can fill it out yourself and make copies and so on and so forth. That you can perhaps use this as a way to think about how to create lines. Now there's nothing that beats listening to the masters and transcribing them and trying to incorporate that into our own line, just copying them and creating something from that. It hopefully sounds like us, something that we like. But at the same time, if we are trying to either learn for the first time, how do we do this? Or if we're encountering something that is particularly challenging, this can be a really helpful tool. One challenging thing, for example, is if we have there's a few sort of famous jazz tunes where you've got one bar of a chord and then the next bar is just a half step away. That movement, that half step movement, like from F7 to G flat 7, for example, in Well You Needn't, the Thelonious Monk composition, that doesn't naturally occur to most of us, meaning how to play a walking line that doesn't naturally occur to most of us. So laying it out like this maybe have helped you. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, and I'm not saying you even should do this. This is just an option for those of you that might find this appealing. As I may have said earlier, I'm a visual person as well as an oral person. And so it really helps for me to see something to be able to reinforce what I'm trying to do. So I recorded 2 versions of bass lines on What Is This Thing Called Love, which is a standard that hopefully you know already. If you don't, definitely got to learn that one. It is super, super popular. And I improvised some choruses myself without any sort of guidelines other than what I would normally do, basically, without trying to be too subversive, so to speak. Like I'm trying to state as sort of the generic thing of what a bass line is. I've also recorded 2 choruses of a bass line that Paul Chambers played on What Is This Thing Called Love, and he makes some really, really different choices. And it would be interesting, if you would like to do that, to go back and try to figure out what is he thinking in this sort of column, if anything. And I don't mean he wasn't thinking, but rather he might not be thinking beat to beat. And really, ideally, when we're improvising, you're not really thinking beat to beat. That's a really important caveat. I just realized, don't do this. Don't try to make this the tool by which you improvise. It's rather a tool in the practice room to figure out sort of how to connect things or to give you other options or to be more aware of what's available. If you're quite far on, like Mr. Carter, you can certainly think about this beat to beat because your mind can move that fast. All available things are, kind of happening at once. It's Schrodinger's baseline, right? It's existing and not existing at once. Oh, somebody's going to get me on that. I know it's not just about the cat, but about the decay, right? So anyway, the superimposition of a walking bass line. Oh, I'm getting into nerd territory here. I love it. So compare what I did with what with what Paul Chambers did, and you'll find very, very different choices. Not only because he starts in different places and that leads him to different places, but he's also got a different sensibility about how to approach the bass line that I am trying to learn. We're all trying to learn to be like the masters. One quick example is that on the first chord is often played these days as a G minor 7 flat 5. That flat 5 would be a D flat. And Paul doesn't really play that as that D flat very often. In fact, in another instance, we've got an F minor 7. A flat is the minor 3rd, and he not only plays an A natural, but emphasizes it, right? This bar 3 of the part of my example of him. He plays A natural on an F minor 7, which should be A flat. Doesn't just play it, but actually points to it like, hey, look at what I'm doing. And it sounds amazing. So when he does it. So there's lots of things to analyze in that, but perhaps this tool is really, as I say, best used when you are trying to discover different pathways to create walking lines for yourself. I hope that this was helpful. Please do get that PDF below. It's free. And like and subscribe, you know, the whole deal about YouTube videos. But I do really appreciate it, and it really helps to have your support and your kind words. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope that it was helpful. Always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.